Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you just might be a damn good director. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. Now that I'm back in the theater, I'm just out here like a thought. I'm going to the theaters all the time. Like, oh, you got that in the theater? I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to see it. So I had to go as soon as I possibly can to go see A Quiet Place 2 because if there is no other movie out of the current stuff that is being released that needs a theatrical experience, A Quiet Place 2 is. I definitely saw A Quiet Place 1 in the theater in Dolby Surround, and it was insane. That is a part of the experience, the sound, the dropping of sound, the levels of sound, however sound is being used or not used, is the whole point of that film and this series. So I knew that I needed to be in the theater. Oddly enough, at my particular AMC, and I know just Disney is a beast, Cruella was in the Dolby, and Quiet Place 2 was in the IMAX. I wish that was reversed because I feel like the sound for A Quiet Place is more important to the movie than the sound of Cruella. But that's a side story. It has almost never happened, and it's pretty rare that a sequel lives up to the original. It never ever, hardly ever surpasses it, but at least say equal. And I think this is one of those times where I can say they're almost tit for tat. It's always going to be a few levels down, just because the original is the original. The rules were set there. Everything sort of that occurs in this film is set off of what happened in the first. So it is not as original and is basing its blueprint and its game plan off of that. So there's always going to be a bit of level down. But I think if you're playing apples to oranges, this is a series or two films you should sort of consume together. And I think you'll be in for a damn good time. So for those of you who've seen Quiet Place, you know what you're getting into with A Quiet Place 2. This picks up directly after the first one ends. There is a bit of a prologue, which I need to get into a little bit because it's fascinating. It is brilliant. Basically deals with day one, and it works on two levels. It works one to establish how this world became the way it is. Starts with day one, and you just get to see some callbacks to the original. It is cool to basically start the scene of this movie in the same spot the first movie began, but just at very different times and very different things that have occurred. What I also think is smart, though, as a director, is to shoot this scene showing the kids, the actors who play the kids in the past, and then show them how they basically, unfortunately, kids grow up quickly. So they've aged up a little bit. They don't look as young or as small as they did in the original. But if you put them in the past and show them the actors playing the kids back then and then skip the original movie and go back to the present day with them being that age, it's not as jarring to see a bit of a growth spurt because you've already seen them in a place where they existed in the past in that age group. That's just a brilliant trope. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but if you did, well done, because it allows the audience to sort of forget. They're like, hey, yes, aging has happened. And if you watch them back to back, you'll still sort of get it, but it's not jarring enough that the way that it's shot and filmed and pieced together sort of allows you to ignore that these kids may have grown like foot and a half, specifically the daughter. But it is still well shot, and I think what is amazing as a director is to take a prologue with characters for the most part that you already sort of know that they make it out of this situation, and still make it feel so damn intense. Like that opening sequence, the movie starts off on a crawl to sort of establish world, everything's how it go, and then it just is intense and just beats you over the face. And I was in the edge of my seat like, this is insane. I know these characters are going to be okay, but this is shot and done so well that I can't handle it. Well done. Right after that, then it picks up directly where the last film is, where I know some people got angry with the shotgun pump and it's like, oh, she's going to be a super action star. Won't spoil the movie, but I can tell you that is not quite what happens, but it is a quick lead into that. Some of the tropes that have been in it and the ideas that have been set up in that film are being used here. The biggest is they have found the weakness. So now this film is sort of about how do we get this weakness to work in our benefit to help the mass. This movie definitely does the old hang your hat on the sequel trope, where we'll take all the characters that you know and love and let's separate them and put them through absolute torture. There's nothing wrong with that. It's tried and true. It's worked all the time, and it works well here. With Cillian Murphy being the add-on to sort of give another branch off, but it is really, again, intense. You feel peril. You never know. I think because the first film established that no one is safe and anybody can go, we are now sort of on the edge of the seat for this film. Like, this series is already sort of set in motion that no matter who you are as far as the pecking order, as far as acting and directing, usually if you're the lead or the second lead, there's no way in hell you're going to die. This world has established that that's not necessarily true, so you're kind of always on edge. And I think with having that established and going through this film, you kind of are like, oh, what could happen next? This film, more so than the first, uses the two kids as the leads, as opposed to, obviously, Krasinski is no longer in the film, beyond the prologue. But Emily Blunt is sort of put more so on the sideline, which makes sense because you got to think about also her character is still just coming off of birth. So she may not be in the best stand. She still has a hole in her foot. So a lot of her stuff is sidelined, where the kids are sort of more so the two that are the yin and yang of the story. Specifically, who shines the most is Reagan, the daughter. I think it's smart to make her the lead because she is at a disability, being deaf. So a lot of the sequence, there's a moment, I won't spoil it, but there's a moment where she is gone off by herself, and because you almost forget, because they're showing it through the eyes of us, where we can hear sound, we can hear stuff, that you're going with him like, oh yeah, that's right. And then there's a moment you're like, shit, she can't hear, and unless she turns a certain way or looks a certain way, she has no idea that she's in complete and total danger, which is just a crazy way to play with sound and continue that sound, of all things, matters the most in this film. And it's a fun sequence and a fun way to watch. I sat here throughout the entire movie just thinking like, man, Last of Us as a movie or show, which they're doing, is going to be fantastic, because there's a lot of moments that feels a little bit like playing through that game was watching this movie. I think the biggest add-on is Cillian Murphy, who comes off as quite good. There is some heartfelt moments between he and Reagan, who, because of what has happened to him and because of what happened to her, they sort of blend together the best, and they're seeing the good, the best and worst of each other, but doing it through the eyes of whomever they may have lost. And so they're judging each other more harshly than probably they should be, as opposed to just accepting the person for who they are. There's a sequence at the end, after some dialogue that they'd had earlier, that sort of comes back around, where he gives Reagan a bit of a pat on the back and kudos, and you can just see the emotional just relief on her, considering that we've seen in the last film how she and her father had a bit of a falling out because of life, and they have this sort of come up together at the end when he tells her, I love you. Via the prologue here, you can see that they were super close. Like, when they do the whole thing with parents, like, hey, you come with me. And she's like, I want to go with Dad. And she's like, all right, Dad, he's with you. Just lets you know that her first instinct was like, she was a daddy's girl. And so it makes everything that happened in that first film hit even a little harder, because now we know that for a while she wasn't, and then she doesn't have her dad anymore. And so it's just weighing more on her, that she's like, I need to continue or do whatever this legacy is that my father was doing, and I need you to help me. But you're not quite like him, but I'm going to deal with you because you're here. There is a bit of a world building that occurs with this movie that sometimes, if you pull at the threads a little bit, seems odd. Mainly we sort of dealt with him a little bit in the first one, where there's the rogue people who have kind of just become these oddities, these weird, they're not zombies, but they're just running packs and are basically, if you live in LA or whatnot, the Skid Row of it all. That's sort of what it feels like. We don't get much explanation for them. We still don't. They're just sort of pop up, and they've consistently popped up in both films to be nothing more than all right, I'm going to cause chaos type of situation instead of sort of us learning more about them and what's happened to them and how they got here, which is fine. The story's about the Abbotts and their journey and how we're doing things, but then when you start adding in these little sprinkles, some of it's like, well, these last 20 minutes just freaking sped by. Can we talk about them for a minute? Because they've come up twice in 2 films and we don't really have much info on them. All that said, that's the only really nitpick that I have about the film. Another brisk 90-minute, I'm going to just keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. Krasinski is one of those guys. Now, granted, he's only played in this world, but he's putting stuff together that he gets certain things, he's doing certain things, and just the use and play of sound, he's killing it. He's killing it. So, on my scale of once is enough, play it again, Sam, or give me a time stone so I never have to think about this film again. This is a play it again, Sam. I think it's rare that horror specifically, once you do one, it's very rare that the second one is on par with the first. But I think this is one of those ones where we're going tit for tat. They're 1A and 1B of each other. Putting kids in peril always sort of freaks me out. So that automatically keeps me on the edge of my seat. So even though some of this feels like, oh, we've done this before, we're doing it in new and inventive ways. We're doing the way that things are set up. It's very much I'm going to put all these places on the board so you can see how things are supposed to work. This is supposed to work. This is supposed to work this way. This is supposed to work this way. And then when all hell breaks loose, it doesn't. And you're like, oh, shit. You kind of see why the breadcrumbs have been laid all the way through. And it's a really smart way of directing and a smart way of doing it. I enjoyed this so much. I can't wait. I know it's going to be coming on Paramount Plus in 45 days. It's one of those ones where Paramount Plus is like, all right, cool, you can get it 45 days later. So if you have it, go ahead and watch it there. But I really, really suggest everybody, if you can, if you feel comfortable enough, if you're vaccinated, get to a theater to watch it, because this is one that I think you need to experience in a big screen. Even though the crowds aren't going to be filled, I actually think it's a little scary to be in a theater with empty seats around you and the movie is happening, because you're kind of like, oh crap, there's nobody here. But then there are, and you all of a sudden hear somebody like, oh shit. So, have you guys seen A Quiet Place? Do go ahead and leave your comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI, or you can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcasts. We're there. We currently have an episode up about Saw and the Spiral franchise. We will be doing one. A little retrospective on Quiet Place as well as Cruella. Probably in the middle of next week, because holidays, we may not get right to it, but it'll be there. But like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.